So while transitioning into a new career or a new venture, how to develop trust and overcome the fear of failure, which could become my barrier to taking the first step.
Well, okay. So overcome the fear of failure. That's like the main thing when you're in a new venture. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, they're changing into a new career, but they're just scared.
Yeah. Fear can be so debilitating when you think about it, and just with anything that we do, there's always some sort of fear. I think it's important to keep in mind that we all have imposter syndrome. Like every single person does. It's just some of us don't show it as openly as others. I think I'd try and unpack, the classic psychologist, like unpack where the fear is coming from. Like a lot of the time, there's this fear of failure, but like, where does that come from? Or fear of rejection. If we kind of, usually when we boil things down, it's usually like a fear of rejection or fear that I'm not good enough in some ways. And a lot of that can come from conditioning when we grew up, as well as societal pressure of always being perfect or being the good child and then becoming the good adult and, living by these really rigid rules. And when we really, realistically aren't able to adhere to those rules that we set ourselves up for, we feel like we're failing. But so I think I would just explore what that fear is really. What are you really fearing? You're fearing failure, but where does that come from? I would love to unpack that with this person, just with regards to, often it will, we'll end up blaming a parent or something, I'm sure. But it's good to kind of have that understanding. Sorry. It's good to have that understanding. But a lot of the things with fear is it can be debilitating if we believe it and if we feed it. And if you think about, what are you wanting from this life that you have and from this new venture? Like, wow, you've, taken the courage to be able to go into a new venture. It's awesome. What excites you about it? Keep focusing on those things rather than letting that fear creep in. The fear will be there though. That fear is there, and we've got to accept that it will be there. We've just got to decide whether we're going to let it drive or we're going to go, look, I hear you, you're there, I see you, you're very loud. Can you just sit in the back while I'm trying to do this thing? And like what Tara's talked about as well, is like having some compassion with, I'm going to make mistakes. It's something new, but I'm going to learn. And you learn from mistakes more easily than if it was a smooth sail. Like that adversity is where we grow the most. So if you can kind of like, right, okay, challenge accepted. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's actually okay because I'm going to learn from them. So, you can only kind of keep moving. But there's a quote, what is it? It's by Susan David. It's just about fear. You got to feel the fear and do it anyway. Don't allow that to stump you. But know that you're going to still feel it. I find a lot of people, we're like, oh, I'm just so anxious or not confident or I'm so fearful. And it's like, yeah, you are. Like, absolutely. Like, it makes sense. You're doing something new. Anything new is scary because it is uncertain, and uncertainty to our nervous system feels unsafe. And you're only going to start feeling confident while you're doing it. We don't feel confident or no fear before we do something. We start feeling less fear while we're doing something. So if you have that as a frame, that can hopefully help you just keep moving, feel the fear, but grow, choose to grow all the same. So I think, so if you can live by that, that can be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I think that's really important advice, like being able to sit there with your feelings and just fighting it away.
Absolutely.
Tara, did you have any experience yourself, like, I don't know, with imposter syndrome or and how you overcame maybe some feelings around that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the one when you switch into a very different context, it can be something even from like, I grew up skiing and then I go snowboarding and I'm like, I can go down this hill really well, really fast, looking very stylish. And now I'm going to put myself on this thing where I'm going to look like an idiot and I'm going to hurt myself and everyone's going to be watching and like, why would you do that? And it's like, why are you doing it? And the mindset that I think Sharon touched upon is really important. Am I doing this to win or am I doing it to learn? How am I going to make sure I check my ego in there? It's about ego death. It's about what am I going to learn, and how you also position yourself to others to say, I'm going to give this a go rather than I'm going to be number one in the market, because you should be able to say to people, I don't have all the answers, but here's my process on how I would go finding about the answers, or how I would learn, or how I would pivot. That's super powerful in terms of how you position yourself and the stories you tell yourself about how you're going to be in this new context, because you can mentally set yourself up for failure if you're not really careful, and it does indeed prevent you from making that step and learning and growing and evolving as a human and as a professional. But I do think the fear, like I noticed in the chat, there are sometimes financial risks, and sometimes it's not just all about us, and not everyone has the privilege and stability to just go and have fun and learn things. I totally get that. As a breadwinner and as an expat with like no local support and the only one working in my family and all of that jazz. So I had fear, when there was big tech layoffs. I was just like, all right, I'm scared about this. How am I going to handle this fear? And so I literally went through, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I actually wrote down and played through all the chess moves. Okay, if I lost my role, then what would I do? And then what would happen then? And what would happen then? And what would happen then? And I went through like, okay, we've got a buffer of this amount of money. And then I would do this. And if that I couldn't get a role in my current role, what would be the next role I would try out? And just kind of work through the steps to kind of go, I've thought about it. If there are these things happening to me, I've actually done the thinking of what would be the steps of what I would do next. And that just took this huge weight off my shoulders to go, okay, I would be okay. I wouldn't be homeless. Like, I've got a plan. And I only did that because I could tell that I was getting a bit in my head about just being worried, and it affects how you show up. It affects your ability to take risks and to grow and to have joy at work. So if you do feel that fear overcoming you, what are you going to do? And it could be that you start working on a side hustle or a plan B, because that helps you with your fear and you've got a backup. It could mean that you're saving more so you have a buffer. It could mean that you go, that's a great idea, but not now. I'm going to postpone that idea for a year from now. Or I'm going to talk to a family member and share my fear so that if I need to go sleep on their couch after a while, I can do that too. So those are some strategies that you might want to think about as well.
Thanks. I think that's really good advice, because sometimes when you do sit there in your head and you ruminate about all the things you're scared about, it's easier to just put them out in front of you, makes you feel like you're in control and together. So I think, it's really good advice, both of you.